Welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast which asks which movies are well worth watching and remembering for all time. Every episode we discuss a different piece of film history to decide if it should make its way into our movie vault. Filled with questions, trivia and crazy challenges, it's the perfect way to deep dive into a myriad of movies. But don't just take my word for it. Here's a glimpse of what to expect in today's episode.
If you're going to put Demolition Man in there, then you've got to put 21 Jump Street, that's all I'm saying.
I'm still insanely pissed.
I'm still insanely happy. I love Demolition Man.
Paul, what do you think?
Look, it cured anti-Semitism. It's got to go in the vault.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Are you not entertained? I'll be back. Here's Johnny.
Oh, hi, Mark.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
I'm Batman. It's not the car. It's a silly little and my pretty.
To infinity and beyond.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
Well Good Movies.
Hello and welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast that asks which movies are well worth watching and deserve to be remembered for all time. I'm your host, David Oscar, and I'm joined by my co-host, the J to my K, the Wild to my Hops, or the Drix to my Ogsy. It's Craig MacDonald. Hello, Craig.
I was really trying to work out in what direction you were going to go with this one. And yeah, that's actually one of the more harmless ones you've done, to be fair.
I was almost tempted to actually go back to Rush Hour and just reiterate what I said there, purely because I find it just bizarre that you were so eager to get out of the violent crime genre, you almost have brought us back to it in a way.
Yeah, but like I said, the reason I did it is fantastic.
I would just laugh if we end up with like a dystopian like action movie or something next time.
If we end up with a dystopian action film, I will swiftly bring it back. I don't care what children's film I have to suggest. I don't care what rank on the top 100 feminist movies of all time I have to go to. I will get us back on a diverse course.
So, Craig, as I said there, in a way, you've brought us full circle back to the genres of crime.
Is this really a violent film?
It could lead us.
It's got some violence in it. I wouldn't call this a violent film.
We'll ask later. Was Rush Hour, but yeah, we've gone down the realm of police and duos once again. So please do tell us, for those who didn't catch our last episode, what is it we are discussing today?
So today, boys and girls, to deal with the calamity of last week's situation of having to watch the film Night Before Christmas, I decided with my film choice, because my film was chosen by the illustrious winner of last episode's Endgame. Basically, I was told by various friends that watching Night Before Christmas, or as David's tried to gaslight me in some conversations, Christmas Night.
We should be clear that this is a Netflix original.
This is a Netflix original, Vanessa Hudgens produced film. I was told that watching that film would be a transformative experience, so I decided to choose a film that genuinely did improve the world for the better. Because for those who follow Instagram and follow the account of Kanye West, they will know that he watched this film and no longer became anti-Semitic because of the performance of Jonah Hill. And already one of our guests is dying, so that's why this week we are talking about the Nazi-destroying film of 21 Jump Street.
Get ready for a lifetime of being badasses.
Oh, I am.
God, dude, I thought this job would have more car chases and explosions.
Got our first bust.
Yes!
You forgot to read him his Miranda rights. You idiots are officially transferred.
Where do we report?
21 Jump Street.
You are here because you some Justin Bieber, Miley Cyrus looking mothers. You will be going undercover as high school students.
Are you two-strapping? You can't make us look like losers on the first day of school.
And what makes you the expert?
I was cool in high school and you weren't.
Fair?
Rule number 1, no sexual relations with students or teachers.
Let me check out your chest. Check out your test. Let me grade your quiz.
Rule number 2, don't give nobody no alcohol.
I promise you we'll be super professional.
All I do is
Your mother told me that you are undercover.
Shake your mouth.
Hey, yo. That's what
21 Jump Street.
Why do you always jump across the car like that? Because it looks cool. You try.
You okay?
I was just so prepared for just like, yep, today we're talking about like, you know, the crime comedy. And I'm like, no, okay, this is the angle we're going with. Right. So yeah, today we are talking all about 21 Jump Street from 2012 and asking the question of whether it deserves the honor of a place in our movie vault, our vault that encapsulates memorable movies for all time. So for those who don't know, the story of 21 Jump Street is a pair of underachieving cops are sent back to a local high school to blend in and bring down a synthetic drug ring. It is directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, written by Michael Bacall and Jonah Hill, with also credits to Patrick Hasberg and Stephen J. Cannell, who were the writers on the original TV show that this is based on. The music is by Mark Mothersbaugh, and cinematography by Barry Peterson, and it's edited by Joel Negron. It stars Jonah Hill, who also has the writing credit, as Schmidt, and Channing Tatum as Jenko, so they are our sort of comic duo in this buddy cop movie. We also have kind of like career breakout performances in some ways from the likes of Brie Larson and Dave Franco, and then we have a lot of alumni to comedy with Rob Riggle, Jake Johnson, Chris Parnell, Johnny Pemberton, Nick Offerman, and Ice Cube also making an appearance. Very fun movie, very well known for also kickstarting Lord and Miller's careers in some ways as well. And has become synonymous with some of the comedies that we've seen in recent years. So to discuss this film, we thought, what better comic duo to bring back than the very duo that we had on our Rush Hour episode. So, do I introduce them as Potter and Klein or Klein and Potter?
Potter and Klein sounds good. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. So, yeah, we have with us film journalist Paul Klein and video game journalist Aaron Potter. Hello, guys.
Hello, hello. Thanks for...
Welcome back.
I feel like me and Paul should be like bursting through the window, shattering the glass with Dubs coming up behind us. Just, yeah, when in need, we arrive.
I forgot about the Kanye West thing.
I sort of blanked that out of my mind as well. I was like, what a weird time that was. And it wasn't really that long ago either.
I saw a meme which was girls if they have time travel, and it's like, I'm your granddaughter. Oh, wow. And then it's men with time travel, and it's sitting Hitler down to watch. Oh god! of all the Jonah Hill films, he's like that undercover cop where he tries to fuck Brie Larson.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that.
What's great is when I brought this up, David didn't know about this.
Oh no, I did know about
Okay.
it, but I was just kind of like Aaron. I was like, oh, I blanked that out of my mind.
Yeah, because I literally just go in the episode. So we all know Kanye West. And he's like, oh god damn.
Yeah,
It's so crazy that it was like 21 Jump Street. He was like, yeah, 21 Jump Street, and it made me realise that hating Jews made no sense. And it's like, 21 Jump Street did that. 21 Jump Street. 21 Jump Street. Are you sure? Not Moneyball. Not, not some hard-hitting drama. Not like Schindler's List. No.
I was just going to say Schindler's List.
that movie with Channing Tatum. I can't hate all the Jews when that fat one's quite funny. Oh, okay then.
Anyway, moving on. So I'm glad you guys liked the intro of Potter and Klein anyway.
Well, to be fair, they seem to forget about it. They just wanted to talk about the Kanye.
Yeah.
Don't implicate me in this. I can't be held responsible for the actions and comments of Klein. That's all I'll say. I don't know who's the Jonah Hill, who's the Channing in this.
I'm a maverick. I go by my own rules.
Well,
Comments of Klein sounds like an Oscar contender film, to be honest.
It does, doesn't it? Meryl Streep wins an Oscar for it. Oh, she was so good in Comments of Klein.
Well, I was going to say, do you guys see yourself as a crime or cop duo? But I'm assuming after what we just talked about, nobody wants to be affiliated with any crimes.
Do you see yourself as a crime duo?
Yeah, what crimes would we get up to, Paul? What sort of, are we talking like fake DVDs or, pirated copies? At the back of the
being in direct violation of Reddit user agreements.
I think it'd be pirate DVDs of Jackie Chan Adventures.
Don't get me started on the Jackie Chan Adventures, guys. We never got a movie.
It does feel like the sort of thing I think the police would just let you get away with. It's like you're selling bootleg copies of Jackie Chan Adventures? How much?
This was only available in Region 4. How can I get in on this? Like, will my DVD play this? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you specialize in, is just like regional films that are not available.
Old cartoons that no longer get aired on syndication.
Or just films that, like, Paul, didn't you say once that you watched Snowpiercer and like you didn't realize that the part of it
I didn't
was like
realize the Song Kang Ho's character was meant to be subtitled because the DVD I had didn't have subtitles. So I was like, oh, they've gone like Bong Joon-ho's gone in like, oh, we wouldn't subtitle the English, so you just have to get from. And I'm like, oh, his performance is so good, I kind of know what he's saying, and by their reaction, I kind of get it. And then I watched it again at the Prince Charles, and I was like, oh, it was subtitled. I'm just an idiot.
You live and you learn.
So, yeah, today we're talking about 21 Jump Street. And as I said, we've brought back Paul and Aaron to discuss another comedy duo film. But first of all, I just thought we talked about buddy cop duos in that episode. But I thought in the time frame we're in now, and also just it was in that time of 2012 in which like comedies have changed. I would say that they were quite more influenced by things like The Hangover. You also had, as this film points out, a lot more like rehashing of like old TV shows, etc. What do you guys think about this era of comedy? Do you think this kind of like changed the wave in a lot of ways, or do you think it sort of like fits with what was being made, you know, years before and sort of years after? Paul, what would you say?
See, with 21 Jump Street, I came to it quite late. I came to it, we were discussing before, I used to work in a cinema. I came to it after I'd seen 22 Jump Street. So I'd seen the second one and I enjoyed it. And I was like, I better go back to the first one and see what that's all about. Because I made the assumption that it was going to be knocked up, super bad type humor. And actually, it's really well written and like funny in a way that's quite clever, as opposed to, you know, some of those other ones where you feel like they just were riffing and they picked the stuff they like best. Whereas like 21 Jump Street is really funny in the way that they're going like, yeah, we're rehashing this thing that was in the 80s and we're bringing it to a modern audience. And it's like, you're doing quite funny. And I think that it stands out as one of the better comedies from that sort of, that era, I think. And also I think it sort of reinvented Channing Tatum as somebody that, you know, men, in a traditional way, men can be like, oh, I like Channing Tatum now, because he's not in, you know, girly, I'm doing quotation marks, you can't see it's a podcast, girly films, you know, like Step Up, and he was in a lot of romantic stuff, and then he was in this, and it was like, oh, guys can like him now because he's in this comedy.
I'm surprised you didn't physically mention Magic Mike, because that is obviously...
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. I was like, do you categorize it within that, which obviously the appeal is to women? But
Magic Mike's hilarious, because I was like, oh, that's just going to be sexy men dancing. And I'm like, there's a lot of existential dread in this sexy men dancing film. I'm like, why have I got to watch him do his taxes? I thought I was going to see him shake his bottom. I'm like, this is ridiculous. But yeah, no, I like 21 Jump Street. I'm not going to bury the lead here, and I think it's really well written. I think I don't think it goes for cheap jokes. You know, like a lot of, you know, The Hangover in particular is quite hateful. I think I do laugh at some of it. I have to admit, I'm not, you know, proud, but like 21 Jump Street has that good bit where Channing Tatum hits the guy, and they're like, you hit a gay guy, and he's like, I didn't hit him because he's gay. I hit him. And then he turned out to be gay afterwards.
If anything, it's more homophobic if you didn't hit him.
That's I do love.
Exactly.
I do love Schmidt's like excuses for him during this film. Yeah, I think it's like you said, Hangover hasn't aged well in some senses. I think, especially like the third one, in which they're just like, yeah, and this like decapitated giraffe for some reason, and you're just like, oh, okay. So I think a lot of the movies where you look around at that time, I think it does sort of make sense within that era. You got things like Neighbours, Pineapple Express, Zombieland, you know, like things that are sort of playing with genre, but also giving you sort of like big name actors, and obviously Jonah Hill having the success of things like Superbad, etc. So he's still within that sort of realm, as you said, Paul, of things like the Seth Rogen sort of films. But then you got Channing Tatum comes in to sort of help a bit more with like the action, and then the fact that Lord and Miller are adding almost like another layer to it as well, which is kind of parody and something like more original. Aaron, what's your experiences with this film? Had you seen it when it first came out? Or?
Yeah, so similar to Paul, I'd only ever seen this film once before the viewing for this podcast, and I'd never really rated it that highly in my head, probably because it was quickly superseded by, in my opinion, the vastly superior 22 Jump Street. There's still jokes in that that I regularly just recall in my head on a daily basis, and sort of, I feel like I've become snapshotted and like turned into memes on Twitter, and like what was it, my name is Jeff, like that was just like everywhere. You know. And I going into this viewing again, I knew I was like, I was looking like for those moments, and there's a couple there. I feel like, because in this film you've got the Rob Riggle factor. He only shows up in the second one, obviously, briefly in a cameo appearance. So, and I do like myself a bit of Rob Riggle, I can't lie.
He's so good. He's not in a lot. Like, he's in lots for not very long, and he's almost always the best thing
He's your
in
fall
it.
guy.
Like, him in Step Brothers is so funny.
Yeah. What is that? The film where he's just going woo constantly? He's behind the desk.
Yeah, and he's just constantly shouting at them. He's great in this. He's so
good.
funny.
He's underutilized. So yeah, like going into this one, I was kind of like, I don't know what to expect, but to concur with what like Paul said, like I agree that this is a much more like elevated comedy when compared to a lot of the ones that we've already spoken about, and I think that's largely because you got the Lord and Miller factor as opposed to the Judd Apatow factor, where Judd Apatow sort of had a string of early hits early on, sort of starting with the 40-Year-Old Virgin, and I think that I've always thought of in my head as the 40-Year-Old Virgin as kind of like a nexus point in terms of like that birthed so many comedy actors' careers. Obviously, you've got Seth Rogen, you've got Jonah Hill, then you've got Steve Carell that goes to do his own thing, you've got Paul Rudd, and then you've got the other member of that friendship group that kind of didn't really go on to do a lot in comedy, which I always thought was a bit strange. I can't remember the name of the actor, apologies. But yeah, I did really enjoy 21 Jump Street on this second watch, just due to how clever the script was and how self-aware it was, because this came out in 2012 at a time where being self-aware wasn't overdone yet, and I feel like as a result of this, like a lot of people tried, you got things like Let's Be Cops, you got the Chips movie remake with Dax Shepard, which the less said about the better. Another translation of a TV show that just feel a bit try hard and do lean into that like cruder form of comedy a bit more. Whereas for the most part, in amongst the sort of Rob Riggle trying to pick up his dismembered penis with his mouth, and all these other
I wondered how long it'd take for us to mention that.
Yeah. I was glad to be the one to bring it up. Channing Tatum like throwing up on Jonah Hill's shoulder. Like in amongst that, it's really a bromance movie just as much as it is a buddy cop movie, and that might be like cheesy to say, but the fact that they stealth that in whilst playing upon tropes that you typically see in like 80s buddy cop movies and even 90s, as we found out when we talked about Rush Hour. So yeah, I really enjoyed it on the second watch this time around. Appreciated what it was doing and sort of where it sent people's careers. But having said that, I still think I'd need to watch it again. But 22 Jump Street, I think it's very clear that they didn't know what they had with 21 Jump Street. Lord and Miller weren't quite trusted. They started to prove themselves. And then with the second one, they were just like, here's a blank check. Go and make the funniest sequel you can. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually, because when I always look back on them, I'm like, oh, yeah, the original, that's got... It's more of a sort of cleaner, tighter film. Whereas 22 Jump Street, I suppose, maybe initially when I first saw it, I was kind of like, oh, they are throwing everything at the wall, and is this too madcap? Is this a cohesive story? But then, like you said, you are right in terms of there are more memorable moments from it. And then when I did think about some of the story beats from that film, as I watched 21 Jump Street, I was like, oh, right, no, that was in 22 Jump Street. So like one of my favorite jokes from that is Jonah Hill with the shoes when he's walking away, like when we had She-Hulk, when Daredevil did the same thing. I'm like,
doing the walk of shame.
Yeah, I'm like, this is always fantastic. It's just always such a fun visual, and especially the way that Jonah Hill plays it when he's just like walking past that girl and he's just like, hey Jessica, and he's like, oh, I can't wait to get home and just like wrap up and watch Friends all day or something like that. I was just like, that's perfect. It's just the image of him carrying the shoes,
him doing the slam poetry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Julia Rob hurts. Rob hurts. Like, so good.
It's another
Jesus died for our sympathies. It's so funny. It's the bit I like is when he hooks up with a girl And then he's telling them about it, and he's like, "We did it all kinds of ways. We're talking missionary. We're talking missionary. We're talking. I'm on top and she's on the bottom."
For me, it's then the culmination of that when he then has to go back to the office with the captain. He just slams a picture down, and you just have like Jenko on the side there for ages, like, oh shit!
Yeah, it's
Just
like
that
ticking away in his head.
just running around.
Yeah.
That's been on loop on my head all day.
Yeah, that is amazing.
He's when Ice Cube's having the freak out at the buffet breakfast.
Yeah.
And he's like, he like takes the tongs and he's like slamming loads of green beans on his plate. And he's like, "Give me these green beans." And then Jonah Hill's like, "Let the man have his green beans."
Yeah, I think Channing Tatum got to flourish a bit more. I think that it's a bit like Chris Hemsworth in a way, almost like from Thor: The Dark World to Thor: Ragnarok, in terms of like, no, you are a funny guy. You can sort of like thrive in this a bit more. So, and I think, yeah, it's interesting bringing up the fact that they're more of a bromance, because I suppose to look at something like The Hangover, which is, like you said, can be mean-spirited, even a film, you know, we've quite enjoyed Craig, what's it called, Due Date.
Yeah.
You know, even that can be like very like, you know, mean-spirited in some
Yeah,
way.
but I love it for its mean-spiritedness.
Yes. But when you compare it to something like this, or then you look at things like Neighbours and a lot of the Seth Rogen, James Franco films, a lot of those are based on like their friendship and everything, rather than them being rivals, as like I think films in, you know, the 80s, 90s, early noughties would have done. So, and I guess it's kind of like, you know, men being more comfortable with that aspect of themselves, how that's kind of like evolved. So, you know, it's a lighter watch in that sense. But yeah, there's a lot of memorable stuff in 22, and it's interesting because we've almost gone back again with Rush Hour. I think you mentioned, Aaron, this is like, oh yeah, another film in which I prefer
Yeah,
the sequel.
I did think that. I was like, oh, why do we always like end up talking about the first ones that I'm not as well versed in, and B, prefer the sequel. But I think this is feel free to disagree, but I think 21 Jump Street's a much better film than the original Rush Hour, if we're talking original buddy cop movies. Because there's less racism in it as well, guys. There's less racism.
I think it's quite subversive, 21 Jump Street. You expect the jock guy's going to be the cool guy, and the nerdy fat guy's going to be the nerdy fat. And then it's like, oh no, times have changed, and the nerds
saving the environment's cool now. You know, why don't you care?
Exactly. And I do love Channing Tatum's budding friendship with the group of super nerds. And he's like doing the forced death grip and, you know, kneel before Zod. I think it gets some really good jokes in about, you know, I do find the whole thing about the teacher, you know, fancying Channing Tatum, because there's so many films where where like male teachers leer at teenage girls, and also he's not a teenager, so it's not inappropriate. And I just find that really funny, where she's like really thirsting after him, and he's a moron.
I just can't believe they actually just ruined the tension of that joke in like sort of a mid-credit scene where they actually just shows them having sex.
Yeah. And even just the joke in the limo as well. I was like, is this like bad sort of like representation? I was like, well, no, it's just kind of like saying this girl is just drunk and stuff like that.
Which particular joke?
When he's like in the sunroof and he's like, no, stop.
Yeah.
I'm trying to shoot you. And she's like trying to pull down his trousers. And I was just like, that kind of stuff.
No, I think that's fine. I think that's actually fine.
It is funny because it's just the way that it's played. It's not saying like, oh, it's just because, you know, she's this way inclined. It's just like, no, she's just drunk and she's just in the mood. You know?
Yeah,
and
she clearly doesn't know what's going on.
The bit where they go to the evidence locker because they're going to throw a house party, and he's like a pound of cocaine. We're trying to throw a party, not ruin their lives.
Yeah.
Pound of weed, best party ever.
Yeah, and they even give some like agencies to like, you know, the
choose your words wisely,
exactly,
David.
Yeah. The women who work.
Do you want to just say what you want to say? We'll cut it out later.
Just her name is
the
Cinnamon,
ladies
like
of the night.
Cinnamon, and who gets together with.
Oh, the escorts.
Yeah. Yes, escorts. There you go. It's like even them, you know, there's no kind of like derogatory like way they act around them. The fact that like Channing Tatum's character just comes in, he's like, "Hey, Cinnamon."
Yeah, I thought that was
yeah. They brought in later, and it looks like they're all having like an orgy in the bar in the bathroom stall.
Yeah,
and then it just turns out they're listening in on the headsets.
Yeah,
there's some really good evidence here.
I mean, David mentioned in the intro sort of like how many great actors that went on to do a lot of exciting things are just like, you know, not well having brief involvement in this movie. Yeah, you got Jake Johnson there as the head teacher, Nick Offerman as their boss, and the whole Miranda rights like running joke I thought was good, similar to the Can Jonah Hill like aim and stuff. But in terms of the bit part actors, I was even shocked as so the guy with the glasses, who's part of the nerd group. I don't know if anybody else got this, but he plays in The Big Short. He's sort of Ryan Gosling's like maths guy, and he actually has like a cutaway to the camera. He's like, oh, he likes to tell people I'm that because, you know, all sorts of stuff. So, and yeah, I was like, I tried to place him, and then obviously the teacher that wants to sleep with Channing Tatum, that's Erin from The Office. The woman in the limo, she's another character from The Office. This whole thing's like an Office reunion. It's kind of crazy.
For me, the one I really enjoy is the guy I said there's in the loop. I think he's one.
We got Chris Parnell, Johnny Pemberton.
Yeah. Johnny Pemberton. I think he is one of the like nerd group as well. Right?
Yeah, because it's like the one who's like the blonde curly hair. You're talking about the one who's on the computer when they're in the stall. Yeah, but
basically, he has a small part in the loop that I always just recognize him for, where he just has to be sarcastic to Malcolm Tucker and just gets the absolute shit ripped out of him.
I know the one you mean. He's in Superstore. I know him from Superstore.
Oh yeah.
Which is a lovely show.
Johnny Pemberton. Wait, he's in Superstore? When's he? Who's he in that?
He plays one of the characters, Cheyenne's.
Of course! Oh my god!
White trash husband.
Yes,
I feel such a fool.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, he's like, oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I love the
rapper.
Yeah. Yeah. The cast of Superstore is great.
It's deceptive.
And even just thinking about Rob Riggle, because I do think he steals the film. That bit where he catches them when they've taken the drugs, and he's like putting he's putting his tongue back in his mouth.
Yeah,
he's like put your tongue away. Put your tongue away. he's like trying to push it back in.
My favorite line in that is when he says like, "Don't blow on me, son." I just don't think anybody else could have like pulled that off as well as him. In which he's like quite well. Obviously, you don't see him because they're tripping, but he just like pulls off the seriousness of where he would be like saying it without thinking like what it sounds like.
For me, my favorite side character was the principal because he had two of my favorite lines of the film. That being, seriously, nobody around here, including me, is doing anything to solve this. And also, I'm one gay black kid being punched away from the fight.
Yeah,
I do think this film is a good one, and I think if you're going to revamp a TV show, especially one that's quite dated, you know, because there was a spate of it in the 90s. They were like every sort of dad show got a movie. You know, Mission Impossible is the one that works and was good, but they did like a Brady Bunch movie. They did. An old James Garner show called Maverick, which was like a cowboy show.
Yeah,
Mel Gibson did it. They did loads of them, and they didn't work. And then they sort of were like, "Oh, movies based on TV shows don't work." And it's like, well, no, they work when they're good. Like case in point, 21 Jump Street. When I heard that, they're dusting off that show that Johnny Depp did at the beginning of his career, you're going to make a movie out of that. That's going to be awful. And then it's like, well, not when you're clever about it and you've got good script, because the opposite is like Baywatch, where you're like,
oh Christ, Baywatch.
Baywatch wants what 21 Jump Street had. Yeah. Although Baywatch did have one bit that did make me laugh, which is
say it and I'll work out if I need to judge you or not. Go for it.
Well, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II is talking to Dwayne Johnson and Zac Efron. And he's like, you caused loads of public damage. And Zac Efron goes, yeah, because we were in lifeguard pursuit. And he's like, oh, okay, that's fine then. He said, there's no goddamn thing as lifeguard pursuit. That bit I find really funny.
That's fine.
But what Baywatch gets wrong, 21 Jump Street gets right. It's so because a lot of the story beats are the same. A lot of the jokes are the same. You know, there's the fat guy that gets with the unimaginably attractive person, and they do that in 21 Jump Street. Jonah Hill gets with Brie Larson. Objectively, Jonah Hill is not as good looking as Brie Larson, but
I agree on
it's
that.
done in such a great way. Whereas in Baywatch, it's like, why is she like? Why is he? Yeah. It makes no sense.
As crazy as it sounds, there's almost like a groundedness to 21 Jump Street because, like you say, like Brie Larson, she's great, she's Brie Larson and stuff. But Baywatch, it's kind of everyone's been supermodel-ified, to such a degree where it's like, well, why do I even care about these people? Because they just look like caricatures being like bashed together like action figures kind of things. Like, the irony is that Zac Efron's on record as saying he felt dirty after it and that he was in the best shape of his life, but mentally he kind of like hated it the entire time. Whereas you get the impression with 21 Jump Street that everyone was having a fun time, Channing Tatum, Jonah Hill included. And like, I almost forget that it was Brie Larson in this movie until I sat down and watched it again, because since obviously she's ascended to the Marvel, she's been adopted by the Marvel hive mind.
And public hatred.
And public hatred, arguably. But with the Brie Larson factor, I'm kind of, because obviously it's just a few years before that we get a film called Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and she almost looks like she's more developed as an actress in Scott Pilgrim than she is in 21 Jump Street, because she's playing like the every girl in this almost, whereas in Scott Pilgrim she's not that, and it's kind of weird to see where her career goes. And I'm just sad that Scott Pilgrim versus the World wasn't the one that made 200 million at the box office, and 21 Jump Street, I mean, it's a good, it's no Scott Pilgrim. But,
Don't get me wrong, I really like Brie Larson, and I think, I'm a big like defender of the Captain Marvel film. For people who just say, oh, it's it's not the greatest, but not so much against the people who hate it for other reasons. But I think that
I'm Thor: The Dark World's biggest defender, David. So do not worry about that.
I'm in safe space.
I like Wonder Woman 1984. I will defend that movie.
It's all coming out now.
Oh well, yeah, exactly. That's definitely a podcast in itself. But the one thing that Brie Larson, some people I think take the wrong way and stuff, is that sometimes she come across as emotionless, which some people say with like Captain Marvel, for example. She's playing a very difficult character because she's meant to be this kind of like strong, stoic kind of character. And with something like Scott Pilgrim, she's able to come out with this more kind of like kooky, sort of like wild character. And I think obviously in her like Oscar-winning performance, it's very much a part of her character that she's like traumatized and stuff like that. So she's going to be very like within herself. Whereas here, I think it's like you said, Aaron, I think it's just more that she's just playing the every girl and there wasn't enough direction. Whereas the girl in the second film is a bit more developed as like what that character is meant to be. She's a college student. She's like, into that kind of like group within college. Whereas here, I guess she kind of thrives off just the lines in which she's trying to be like, this is what a modern, school girl is like, in which she's
I can't tell if you're criticizing her or not.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that like this is just a script thing, which is not her fault kind of thing.
I mean, I thought she was fine in this.
Yeah, no, I'm saying she is fine. Weirdly, I for some reason thought that she threw up on Jonah Hill when he like came over to her at the ambulance. I'm like, is this some other film which I thought of? Like, I thought she was going to throw up on him.
Sounds like that could happen.
Yeah, when he goes up to her at the end. But
it's weird as well, because like thinking about what it gets right as well is that the core audience for this film is people that probably have never even heard of 21 Jump,
I hadn't.
Like the TV show.
Never knew about it. Yeah,
I knew of it because I was, not so much anymore, I was a Johnny Depp fan, so I did know that he was in a TV show. And so when his cameo at the end comes up, I was like...
Did you know, but did you see it coming? Because I didn't the first time.
I didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming at all. But I was a bit like, are people going to get that this is a show, a reference to the TV show? Because it's not like, Friends or something, where it's like an iconic show. I don't think it's not very good. The show wasn't very good.
I know Johnny Depp, he's caught in all kinds of like trouble potentially, and like, in his personal life, he does some questionable things. But like, this came out around 2012, and I think this is still the time where Johnny Depp like gave a shit, to put it bluntly. And even in this like small cameo that he has, he like, I mean, they clearly only had him for a day, and I don't believe for a second that he was ever on set with like the majority of these actors, other than like the other henchman guy who's got to stand in the foreground to make it look more cohesive. But like when you first see that gang in the park by the tree near the beginning, and there's that guy which we now know is in prosthetics, like that's clearly not Johnny Depp, but they sell it just enough. And I thought it was really cool that, because obviously you find this out afterwards, but even the guy who was with him was another guy from the original TV show. I don't know the actor's name, but it's quite funny to see like Johnny Depp's star ascend all this way. This other guy's gone on to like write a few bits, produce a few bits, but they still managed to get both back. And I think, again, I keep coming back to it, but that's like the Lord and Miller factor. Just they show that they care, regardless of how obscure the source material is. They treat it with respect.
So basically you're saying where Johnny Depp he gives a shit, 3 years later, Mordecai in 2015 is where he's lost his comedic integrity potentially.
I couldn't get through Mordecai.
To be fair, when I said I used to be a fan of his, it actually has nothing to do with personal stuff. It's that around 2009, 2010, I started to realize that he was phoning it in.
Yes.
Alice in Wonderland, Rum Diary, Dark Shadows. And since then, he's yet, I know, he was passable in Fantastic Beasts 2.
Yeah.
But the film was terrible. But like, I've just not seen anything from him since, maybe Sweeney Todd, where I'm like, oh, that's a guy that cares. Now
Murder on the Orient Express, maybe.
But like 21 Jump Street, I think the reason...
Oh yeah, I forgot he was in that.
Yeah.
Not for very long, spoiler alert. But like, I feel like
yeah.
the reason why I maybe got this impression that he's doing a good job in 21 Jump Street is because he's just playing like a normal guy. Like, Johnny Depp can play normal, and I don't know why. I guess it's not fun for him. But do you remember, was it that Black Mass film where he plays Whitey Bulger? Is that the character's name?
Oh,
and he is just such a
yeah.
caricature. Like, I can't take this seriously. Like, it's meant to be this super dramatic scene.
I think part of it is going to be, given that it's one of his earlier, like the show was one of his earliest roles, he probably is just like, okay, yeah, this is paying homage to this, so I'm just going back to the type of acting that sort of started me off. So if he was like his sort of usual, like quirky, low mono, like fragmented performance, I do not understand how he would get another role after that. So he has to be regular.
It's almost like it's an anti Johnny Depp performance in some ways. Like the fact that he's in a kind of elaborate costume with a fake nose and stuff is as if like now if he made a film and he was dressed up as the Mad Hatter and then took off the mask, it was like, no, actually I'm this badass guy, and then starts shooting people. It's like he's almost like free of the like, goofy Johnny Depp there for a moment. And I think he plays a bit, he has a bit more fun with it. Like that moment where you came to me and my wife's wedding, he's just like, he's like tough titties, I f***ed her afterwards and all this. And you're like,
oh no, yeah, you played sax at my sister's wedding. Yeah, well, I f***ed her afterwards.
It's weird because Johnny Depp as well, like whatever else is true of him, he does kind of hold, maybe he doesn't think the roles are very good, but he does sort of acknowledge where he came from, because there was I was watching a documentary on the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and he was in the first one. He plays the boyfriend, and Wes Craven was talking about how he was like, Johnny Depp was interviewed years later. He was very nice about my film, and Johnny Depp talks about his death scene. He gets sucked into his own bed, and then all this blood spurts out the top, and he goes, "Yeah, it was a pretty good death." So he kind of does acknowledge where he's come from, but I think also it's a chance to make fun of it as well.
I think it definitely this film stands out because I didn't know about the show. I didn't know he was in it. So it was just the most surprising cameo I've ever had, like in a film. Like probably the only other one that springs to mind is like Darth Maul in Solo or something like that, in which you're like, whoa, what the hell?
When there's a Lord and Miller connection with that film as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is a deep cut, but I just didn't know that connection. So it still worked for me because I thought it's like, oh my God, it's Johnny Depp, like, huge Hollywood movie star. So it kind of worked in that sense, even though I didn't know what they were actually
that
referencing.
one works, and then you get to Baywatch, and Pamela Anderson shows up at the end, and I was literally like,
right.
And David Hasselhoff, like you're waiting for it in that movie.
David
Do you know what
Hasselhoff's
I mean?
cameo is him having a beer with Dwayne Johnson. It's not even in the film; it's in the credits, and it's not even like a scene where he's like he's playing a role. He's just chilling with Dwayne Johnson, drinking beer. It makes no sense.
I mean, one good cameo I definitely also want to defend in this situation, Tommy Wiseau in Disaster Artist.
Yeah.
Showing up as a completely different character. Yeah. And he's like, the hell are you like me?
21 Jump Street, I think, is sort of the benchmark of like, you're going to take this old show that maybe, hasn't aged well and you want to revamp it because it's an IP and everyone needs an IP. It's like, we'll do it like that. Or if you're going to take an action franchise, you got to do Mission Impossible. I think Mission Impossible and 21 Jump Street are like the gold standards of, this is how you take an old show that and Star Trek. The new Star Treks as well are quite good for that as well. You take something that's a bit kitsch, a bit, hasn't aged well, and you sort of revamp it for a modern audience, and you kind of, it doesn't dump on what the show was, but it does go, look, it's ridiculous to get police officers who are like, all right, they're like meant to be 30, and the recurrent joke where they're like, You look very old to be a high schooler. 22 Jump
Yeah.
Street does that great thing. It's like, are we going to high school again? Man, you look like you're 50.
Yeah. Well, it almost references, the idea itself, isn't it? Is it Ice Cube who says it about like, oh, well, that's what we do now. We just rehash things from the past and hope that nobody notices. Or is it Nick?
It's Nick Offerman.
Nick Offerman's
They've
character
completely
says
run
it.
out of ideas.
On Paul's point, like this has been tried almost, I want to say, like a decade before with a little movie called Starsky and Hutch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Starring Ben Stiller and Owen
Well,
Wilson.
again, that makes me think of like Dukes of Hazzard and all of those types
Dukes of Hazzard.
things.
But I feel like the mistakes that those movies made, it's like, right, it's literally the characters, it's literally like the same sort of setup, whereas 21 Jump Street, it takes place in the continuity of the TV show, but it adds to it and takes it in a new direction to be its own thing. Whereas, I didn't personally grow up with Starsky and Hutch or Dukes of Hazzard, but whenever I imagine, that generation looks at Ben Stiller, they're not seeing, whoever that character is meant to be. Yeah.
To me, this is interesting in the sense that they kind of kickstart, because it's very much a Lord and Miller thing as well, but I don't know if you guys got examples, but it starts that whole trend of being very self-aware and kind of like meta in your humor. I think a lot of animation started to do that off the back of the Lego movie as well, in which, even like a lot of DreamWorks, etc., is doing like, oh yes, we're acknowledging this is a movie and things like that. And they're acknowledging like, oh yes, we're doing this because this is the bit of the film in which it happens. So I think 21 Jump Street started that off. And obviously 22 Jump Street builds on it a lot as well. By, there's in this film, they have the joke of like, oh, it didn't explode, and building up those expectations, etc. Whereas in 22 Jump Street, then again, it's got that entire end credit sequence in which it literally is just like, right, here's
the best
like
post-credit sequence ever.
You
put
sons
to
of
film.
bitches are going to medical school.
Yeah. What contract dispute?
Hey man, he just got some new glasses. Yeah, man.
Just literally Seth Rogen sat there. Like,
You got to pause that to read the taglines as well. Like the taglines for each of those posters, I think when they go to like ballet school, the tagline is point and shoot. It's like so, or like putting their privates on. Like it's so clever.
Yeah.
Again, with 22 Jump Street, like that end sequence alone, it really is like Lord and Miller saying like, we're this is everything we've got. Like, don't ask us to do this again. You've given us a blank check. We've rehashed the same movie twice. That was already rehashing a TV show. I just want to say that the opening scene of this movie, because it's been so long since I'd watched it, where Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum are literally meant to be in high school. I wasn't sure for a good 5 minutes there if I was like, are they undercover? Are we like mid-job with Channing Tatum? And like, are they already part of the Jump Street thing? And then it's almost like, I know Jonah Hill's got this like hair dyed blonde and stuff, but it's almost like he's stood, like it's like a long distance shot to make him look smaller when compared to the girl he stood next to, like as if they tried to like change his height. I don't know if that was ever intended by Lord and Miller. Yeah.
The downside is this film doesn't have a particularly good villain. Whereas Peter Stormare as the ghost and his daughter. And he's like, why does nobody do the fun drugs anymore in 22 Jump Street? Always, but he's like, when they're all talking about Wi-Fi, and he's like, why does nobody do cocaine?
I love the daughter in 20. It's when they're having the fight and she goes to kiss him. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, I thought there was that emotional scene.
I'm very confused.
And then she like goes in, like, no, stop doing that.
I will say though, I do, because as we know, again, we're talking about troublesome actors. Dave Franco has turned out to be the better Franco brother. And I do think that he does a good job in this film, and he goes on to do great stuff in Neighbours, etc. And I think, again, this was a good comedic turn for him because, there's that bit where he's just like, what happens in jail? It rhymes with grape and stuff like that.
Great.
And like when you then see that followed up in 22 Jump Street, the fact that like Rob Riddle is so great that he's like playing the like, sort of more like butch character, which he's just like, you shut up. And he's just like, I'm sorry. And he's like dominating him in that scenario. It's just funny how that's evolved. Yeah, in this film, I think Dave Franco, he does a good job of being like, you guys narcs, and it's just like, well, that's confusing because you say about like, only a narc calls a person a narc. And he plays that well, I think, of the like cool environmental guy, who still has that like freak out moment.
Oh, and I will say, like, again, this episode's all about connections, but one of Dave Franco's sort of like posse, He played. I looked it up because I was like, "That it isn't, is it?" Because again, this is the sort of film where, in order to make it more believable that Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum could pass as high school students, they've also aged up. Like, I think Brie Larson was in her early 20s or mid 20s when she was in this film. One of Dave Franco's posse, I can't remember the actor's name, but he plays Detective James Carter in the Rush Hour TV series that came out in 2016. So in a roundabout way. I'm blowing Paul's mind here, just for the record.
I've never watched the Rush Hour TV series.
Only one season, funnily enough, 13 episodes.
I never watched the Lethal Weapon series either. So.
When we discussed the film and I was looking clips up online and stuff, I was like, oh yeah, there was the TV show.
Oh, if you made me watch that, I actually might have just quit the show.
But they give Jackie Chan's character a first name, because obviously in the 3 movies he's just called Detective Lee, and he's got a very underwhelming first name, I'll say.
Gary.
But when I think of
it's going to be Ken, because it will be around the same time as that American Idol meme.
Okay.
Ken Lee.
Yeah. Liba diba dachu.
When we were saying about some of the great jokes, though, you guys said about Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill. I think where you really get to see their relationship growing and them as actors in terms of maybe sort of riffing or doing devised stuff. I don't know if this was in the script or not, but it comes across as a kind of in the moment gag, is just when they have to put their fingers in each other's mouths, and then he's just I'm sorry, I just can't sometimes, and he's just is it me? I'm sorry. It's just that's just so perfect. I think the way they it's almost similar to, again, the kind of walk of shame that happens in the next one. It's just such a clever way that they approach it so seriously.
I can't work out how the producers thought that would work with a Men in Black film.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so glad we got Men in Black International instead of whatever that crossover is going to be. Am I right, guys?
Well, I think they were almost building it up to be oh yeah, this great comic duo that were in Thor Ragnarok, and this great comic duo that was in this film. So maybe they wanted
but it's such a grounded 21 Jump Street's it's a comedy, but it's quite it's grounded.
Yeah, the only psychedelic thing is when they're literally on drugs.
Or the only other thing I thought they could do is just take that end credit scene from 22 Jump Street, and this is just one of the alternatives. They just played on that.
I don't know how it ever would have worked. I mean, it's I know that people like franchise crossovers and stuff. The only one, it's a bit like when people are oh, Fast and Furious and Jurassic World, and it's that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work half as well as what I think should happen, which is Fast and Furious should cross over with Transformers, because they transform into cars. The movies are about cars.
Yeah, but also, Paul, you're forgetting one important rule. The only reason that the Men in Black 22 Jump Street film is going to happen, both owned by Sony, Universal owns Jurassic World and Fast and Furious, whereas Paramount's got Transformers, so it's not going to happen.
They need to team up for some synergy.
So it needs to be Top Gun and Transformers.
Top Gun and Transformers, yeah. Starscream versus Maverick. Let's go.
Can you not imagine Vin Diesel driving a car? It goes off a cliff. He jumps out the car. The car transforms into Bumblebee, and then Bumblebee grabs him and throws him into a helicopter. And he's like, "You might be a Decepticon, but I got something more powerful: family."
And does Bumblebee shout "damn" just before he catches him?
Well, it'd be whatever radio frequency you can find.
Yeah, that is true. He'd find Michelle Rodriguez from the movie Fast and Furious and use that.
Talking of cars, I thought in this film again is that a very clever sequence was the driver's ed car, and what I loved about it as well, especially at the start, it just, again, this shows the level of comedy that Lord and Miller are working with in terms of it being grounded, like you said, Paul. Is that in other films they might be oh my god, what are you doing? a Ken Chung sort of character or something like that, really play up the comedy of it. But it's just the fact that they drive off with it and the guy just goes, guys, I don't care. I just love that. But it's also what it sets up for the, similar what we see with the drama teacher, when he's just I should step in here, but I just don't want to, kind of thing. I think that's built up really well. Patton Oswalt is in the second one as well. He's perfect for this kind of franchise. But
you get the same vibe from the paramedic at the end. He's just I guess I'll go now.
Yeah, but even
I'm just here to do my job, and everyone's having a movie around me.
Even in terms of an action sequence, I think that works really well, because we're talking about buddy cops and comedic duos. So to literally put them in a car in which both people
Yeah.
have control of the brakes and the wheel. I'm like, that's perfect. That's such a good choice. The fact that at that moment they are fighting and they are like at odds, and he's just like, you shouldn't stop so far back, and then they hit that guy with the bike, and I've seen it a few times, and I'm like, oh god, like when that guy's jumping on there, I can get stressed about that, but it's a funny scenario.
Grab your cassettes, rewind them, and play them again, because it's time for VHS Corner. This week I thought I'd take us a little bit behind the scenes of this film. So I've got a couple of things, some of them connected, some of them not. Let's just see where we go with it. So obviously I think we need to talk about this film's connection and the way it pays homage to the original TV series of 21 Jump Street. So there's a couple of things. So one, every time they go back to the chapel, they encounter those two female officers who tout their own exploits, including busting a prostitution ring and busting a chop shop run out of a high school auto shop. Both of these were cases that were solved within the original TV series of 21 Jump Street. So it's very much showing the sort of storylines that happened there. Also, Channing Tatum's character being called Jenko. The original captain in the squad of the TV show was Captain Richard Jenko, played by Frederick Forrest. So that's another way in which they're paying homage. And finally, pretty much all of the original cast members from 21 Jump Street have cameos in this film. I couldn't find a list that actually listed them specifically, but apparently they are all there, except for two, who are Richard Grieco and Dustin Nguyen. However, there is a scene in which the bad guys are watching the original TV show, and almost every shot that they have shows Nguyen's character. They both, however, do go on to later cameo in 22 Jump Street, so they do at least come back in that particular way. One thing I obviously love about films like this, I like to look at the people who could have been in this film and look at some of the potential. So here are some of the people who did audition for roles in this film. So we have Juno Temple, Julianne Howe, Gemma Ward, and Jennifer Lawrence could have been in this film. Emma Stone was also considered for the lead female role, but she had to drop out due to The Amazing Spider-Man, so I know how David feels about this. However, this is the one that personally hurts me, and everyone who's a fan of the show will know how much this hurts me. So, originally, the character played by Nick Offerman, so Deputy Chief Hardy, it wasn't going to be Nick Offerman. So it was going to be J.K. Simmons. And so basically when he was on the Howard Stern show, he revealed that he was considered for that role, but scheduling conflicts prevented him from being cast. Once he saw the film, he said it's one of the few that he genuinely would have liked to have played purely for the comedy value. So he is my favorite actor. He would have, for such a small role, he would have put his heart into it. And I'm saddened. As much as I love Nick Offerman, right? I think the guy is great. My boy JK is called my boy JK for a reason. He is my boy JK. From JK to JH, we now talk a lot about Jonah Hill's involvement specifically with this film, because as much as he was only really involved in like the story aspect of writing of the film, he put a lot into making this film what it was, because there's a lot of things that wouldn't have happened had it not been for his efforts. So here's a few things. He ended up having to lose over 40 pounds for this role because he and Channing Tatum were required to do severely physical, demanding stunts. Channing Tatum himself even passed on the movie twice before Jonah Hill physically was the one to convince him to do it. And obviously now, look at where he is now. He came back for the second one, and just his career as like a comic actor has definitely gone up. But also when writing the film, specifically when writing for the character of Captain Dixon, so Ice Cube's character, he wrote it specifically with Ice Cube in mind. So he made sure very much to get him in the role. Funnily enough, though, Ice Cube mostly improvised his lines, which for this film I think can get away with because he doesn't have anything that's like grounded. If he had to do that for the second one, imagine some of those classics being because of Ice Cube. And finally then, insofar as the writing, one edit that had to happen, I understand why it had to happen. I would have chuckled like mad at the first one, but it might have been far. Because so we know in like the first drama class, there's a line from Chris Parnell as the drama teacher where he says, "I was doing cocaine with Willie Nelson's horse." That wasn't the original line. The original line was doing cocaine with Whitney Houston's niece. Yeah, and obviously, after she died, they were very much like, we probably should change that line, shouldn't we, guys? And so they obviously did. So instead, we now have a beautiful, beautiful story of a drama teacher doing cocaine with a horse. But with that is VHS Corner for this week. So what did you guys think?
The Jennifer Lawrence casting is not surprising, considering, again, the type of actress they were going for, I guess, with Brie Larson. And both two actresses, again, which come under the same criticism of like, oh, she looks so grumpy, etc. So that makes sense in terms of who they were going for.
We'll never get J.K. Simmons asking Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill to get him pictures of Spider-Man, and that makes me very sad.
I know, and he went on to become another, detective with Jim Gordon.
I mean, he
police
knows
officers.
what he's good at, right?
He's a chameleon. He can do whatever he wants.
He is. I love J.K. Simmons so much. I'm so glad Whiplash got him, to a point, and I would have loved. He would have been so good. How anybody got through the Miranda rights thing, where he's like, you have the right to be an attorney. I mean, to be fair, Captain, he does have a right to be an attorney.
Yeah,
I guess the only thing with J.K., like Nick Offerman,
yeah,
would have been.
He's so deadpan that he can make that work. J.K. is very expressive,
but also I think that you kind of leave that scene where it is and you're happy because he plays more like one note, one scene characters, whereas like I think you would have wanted more from JK. Like you might have wanted to be like, oh, can he be like, Ice Cube's character
JK
or something
Simmons
like that?
would have come in at the end when the ambulance and like everything's all over and the flashing lights. JK Simmons, like, well, boys, you did it, or something like that. Like just as a nice little bookend, I could see that happening.
The cameos also make sense. It's like what you were saying, Aaron, earlier about like they care, they want to put in the effort. The fact that they still got like the people who didn't have the cameos to like come back for the next one.
But also just made sure they had some representation within the film anyway, but just having him even on TV screens.
Yeah, and I feel like at the start, is it like the headmistress? Like she seemed familiar to me, so maybe she's like a cameo. You said you couldn't find like a full list, but when she's talking to Channing Tatum's character and she's like, you're lucky you graduated. I was watching her being like, I recognize her from somewhere, so I feel like she could have been a cameo because again, head teachers, those kind of like authority figures are often, when they are remaking stuff, it's often a fun thing to be like, oh, they were a teacher.
That's
in
a
the
bit like
original
saying about them showing the TV screen is a bit like in the 2008 Incredible Hulk. Like Lou Ferrigno has a cameo, but because Bill Bixby obviously had died by that point, there is a scene where he's watching TV and what he's watching is a Bill Bixby performance. So there is a similar thing. I quite like that they still cameo in a way. I think that's quite good.
I thought you were going to reference Halloween and Halloween 3.
It's interesting that Jonah Hill, you said that wrote the character of Dickinson with Ice Cube in mind, because he was firmly out of his "Are we there yet? Are we done yet?" era by this point. I want to say that was like a couple of years prior. Not the best comedies, but they have their charms, I guess. And I'm sure, like once he was in that role, having Straight Outta Compton included on the soundtrack just became a bit of a breeze. So two birds with one stone.
I thought that. I didn't realize that song was in the film, and especially so close to when you've just heard him talking as well, which is quite funny.
And also, it's literally referenced in the next film as well, because that's one of the ones I didn't put down.
Queen Latifah.
Queen Latifah's asked where you're from. She went straight out of Compton.
Straight out of Compton. Also, Queen Latifah having a random cameo as Dixon's wife was random.
I'm not even sure if I knew that his name was Dixon, like in terms of like when they just have like the cutaway and you just see like the little plaque, and I was just like, oh, that's great, because it's like, because he becomes a bigger character in the second one, I'm like, it's less of a like, oh, he's an angry man joke. And he's named this, but I don't know if they even say it in the second one. But
is it the first one? Is this one where Dakota Johnson's in it?
Yeah, she's in this.
She's the other detective.
She's cracking cases
left,
right and center. Yeah.
Mimics the other girls. It's like, well, we haven't been popping each other's assholes. Just I love how they come in and they're always like, they're dressed as cheerleaders, they're dressed as like marching band
I want to
members
see
and stuff like
there
that.
was
It's
at
just
one
so
point a
elaborate
female
and-
spin-off like based off of these films in development. I just want to see that movie where it's Dakota Johnson and her partner going off having like.
I just figured it'd be boring as hell because they seem to be
Well,
getting through case
but
after
maybe-
case after case. I don't think there's much fun. It's just like watching
But
competent
maybe you
people
have
doing
like you
their
make
jobs.
the movie like multiple cases, and it's almost like a sketch show as a movie. Like they're moving constantly.
I hear the word sketch show and movie, and I think
don't
of the
say movie
worst movie
43.
I've ever
Don't say
seen
it.
that's actually going to be correct.
Well, it could be just the end credits to 22 Jump Street, just to kind of like,
Yeah, I'll give you that.
bizarre.
Yeah. Like if they literally had in the middle of like one of them is one of the female spin-offs.
Yeah. Anyway, let's wrap up our thoughts then as we now get to the movie vault. So any points that we didn't get to talk about with story, feel free to bring them up here. But as we said earlier, this is our usual task of deciding whether today's film deserves a place in our movie vault. So we like to think of it as a time capsule of films, good and sometimes bad, that should be remembered for someone to dig up in the future. Maybe it deserves its fame, maybe it's been forgotten, or maybe it's great but just doesn't quite fit the bill. So should 21 Jump Street from 2012 gain the honour of a place in our movie vault and be remembered for all time? Craig, I'll come to you first because you suggested this film. What do you think?
I mean, yes. Look, we all agree it's a very strong example of a reboot done well, showing how by using a bit of subversive comedy, you can make something like this work. Can I also just make a pitch here? Because I know we haven't done this in a while, but I think we've also discussed 22 Jump Street in so much like not quite equal detail, but we've all acknowledged to some extent that the stronger moments of that film are stronger than this film. And I just know that if somebody were to suggest it again, it would just be a repetitive conversation. And I just advocate that we put both in.
True, like we have talked about that film quite equally in a way, and that's interesting because I was going to go to Aaron next to see what he thought, because like Rush Hour, he was like, well, the second one is the better one, and
but we didn't actually discuss that one insofar as like actual deep. We were just like, we know the second one is better.
But does he then still think that the first one should go in as well?
The Rush Hour 2
merits?
episode of Good Movies is yet to be recorded, guys. I'm just letting you know.
We'll talk about that and the third one. I don't know if they're like, both.
So
both
is
in
Craig
line.
putting both in the vault? Did I just hear? Is he advocating for? Or?
The first one should go in. I advocate we also put in 22 Jump Street. So I think that's a discussion for like the end.
Yeah, I want to know. Yeah, the first film first, because
the film
I think
that we agreed to talk
because
about
I think
today.
it is like whether people come down to no, it should be one or the other. Because I think one is the superior movie, or like Craig is saying, are they both a set that they need to go in?
Well, they are definitely a set, and like my answer, if the second one's included, is a hell yes. Because I think in terms of like the first movie by itself, like as well as the content of the movie, even though it's good, it's hard to like judge it knowing like in my opinion how much more it's exceeded by the sequel. But I almost think like the film holds obviously a lot of more importance just for the careers it's responsible of launching, the sort of, as we touched upon, how well it works out for Channing Tatum's career and Jonah Hill. So to be honest, even if it's just the first one, I think because of that, despite not reaching the same highs as the second one, it probably deserves a space in the movie vault. If you're going to put Demolition Man in there, then you got to put 21 Jump Street. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, we didn't even cross that whole thing. So
I'm still insanely pissed.
I'm still insanely happy. I love Demolition Man.
It's such a divide. Paul, what do you think?
Look, it cured anti-Semitism. It's got to go in the vault.
I mean, David does say if a film has a strong cultural impact, you don't get stronger than eliminating bigoted views.
Imagine that, just finding the movie vault in the future, and there's Schindler's List, and then the 22 Jump Street series, or whatever next week.
22 Jump Street series,
whatever you want to call it.
21 Jump Street series.
The two films, the Jump Street films. Yeah.
But taking that out of it, I think even on its own merits as just a movie, I think it's very fun. Like, it's funny, it's well written, it is a good example of how you reboot. It's a good example of doing a buddy comedy and going, look, we're doing a buddy comedy, it is what it is, but doing it in a modern way as well, not just not making fun of people. It's kind of having a laugh with people, and I think, yeah, I think it deserves to go because it is, yes, good. It's a good movie.
I've got a question for David though. This is a separate issue, but is 21 Jump Street, is it a film? Does it feel like a film?
I was going to say about that actually, because I was like, oh, is this like there's explosions? Does this mean it's a film?
I forgot that I hated you for that. To be fair, we didn't put in Night Before Christmas because we were like, it's not shot like a film.
No, definitely.
I will say though that this film is testament to that point that, again, it feels more modern, it looks different, it doesn't feel as filmic. But it's indicative of modern filmmaking. And I think I think Craig does bring up a good point, to be honest. It's like about how we've talked about both of them equally. Also, it's not like Rush Hour, in which I think, from what I assume people would say, is that Rush Hour 2 can still stand on its own merits. The first film only really just sets up these guys know each other. This is how they meet. Whereas I think this film kind of like sets up the style of humor, sets up the relationship, sets up this type of storyline, and even sets up the whole, like, you're going to school, then you're going to college. So you almost need the first film to build to that kind of second gag in a way. So I think that they should go in as a set as well. And that wouldn't be the case for Rush Hour, because you could watch number 2 maybe as a standalone film. So I think number 1, if it was just that, then yeah, it did enough for comedy and careers. They should go in. But also the second one, I think we've talked about it enough that it should go into.
I mean, also we have the literal example from Paul being like, look, I saw the second one first. Yeah. I then felt I had to go and watch the first one.
Yeah. Okay, so in goes 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street.
Okay, endgame time. So today we're playing, by reboots, we mean get your shoes on to kick it in the bin. Because we've been talking a lot about like good reboots, but I think it's worth saying that there are lots of films out there which are just bad reboots. They are just cash grabs, they are lazy, and they are disrespectful. Who are they the most disrespectful to? Obviously, people involved in the creation of the originals, people who genuinely did have good ideas, people who genuinely put their hearts out there for people to watch these films, and just to be disrespected. So what I've done is I found an article from whatculture.com, which is 8 reboots that pissed off the original creators. And I'm going to give you the names of all 8 of these films, which are on this list. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to include the name of the person specifically involved in the first one that it pissed off. And then I'm going to give you essentially 7, like, sort of quotes of things they said about the reboots of their films. And I want you to guess which film it's talking about. Okay, so there's 7 quotes, but 8 films you can choose from. So that means that one of the films I won't give you the quote. Hence why there's still a game involved. So you don't just get to the last one and be like, we know this. Cool. Is everyone clear on the rules of the game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. But of course, before we actually get into the game itself, we need to know what it is we'll be playing for. As usual, you will have the opportunity to decide what film we discuss in the next episode. It can be a film that you suggest, or it can be one from somebody else. So we'll go around the room and just get a tease for what it is we could get. So David, tell us about your film.
So mine goes in a very different direction to what we have this week. I think it would have been easy to stick with the same sort of genres or sort of vibes, or again, going down the sort of duo aspect. But the sort of link in terms of the duos is looking at kind of like a more epic storyline in which like 2 characters are sort of destined to do something to sort of change the world. The film I'm talking about is from 1982, and it also links to this film in terms of when we get the trippy drug scene. There's a lot of crazy visuals in that film, and there's a lot of like creepy imagery, which we get even, especially when we see the cat, for example, with like Rob's voice over it, etc. So I'm thinking of having a film that is equally creepy, equally sort of like fantastical, very of the 80s, and yeah, it would be a fun time in terms of talking about lots of different aspects in terms of darkness and light.
I have a feeling I might know what this is. And if I'm right, I think I watched this randomly about a couple of weeks ago. Oh, okay. But we'll see. Okay, fantastic. So that's David's film from 1982. Let's go to Aaron.
So my film very much riffs on the sort of bromance vibe, and it is sort of kind of set within a similar era of comedy, I would say. It's about a platonic friendship that ends up, conquering all, I'll say. It's about two individuals that bond over a love of tacos, selling houses, Lou Ferrigno, but most importantly, the seminal progressive rock band Rush. And it's from 2009.
Okay, interesting. An interesting setup. And
I think
finally,
I know that one.
I know. I'm trying. It's like this day on top of my tongue. But
and finally, we go to Paul.
So, just to take you guys and other people off of buddy cops and stuff, mine is connected in that it's also from a beloved show, but has a postmodern bent to it. It's self-referential, and it's from 2011. And I think would complement this, and hopefully would open up the doors to other interesting avenues later down the line. But it's still within the remit of, looking at a beloved show people remember fondly and sort of poking fun at it.
What year is it from?
2011.
So that's Baywatch then. Yeah, get ready.
Charlie's Angels full throttle, lads. Come on.
Okay, interesting. So we've got David's Clash of Identities from 1982. We have Aaron's Bromance Ship Breakdown from 2009. And Paul's newer reboot thing from 2011. I didn't know how else to describe
TV
it.
show reboot.
So those are the films that are up for grabs. Because I've been on a winning streak with getting my films discussed lately, I'm not bringing one forward.
I know.
If only to give David a chance.
Why did he have to choose Night Before Christmas? For God's sake.
Shut up. But we now have a game to play. So, the 8 films, are you ready to get these films? I would try and write these down if I were you. So, they're all in alphabetical order. So you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about them being like revealing the order of the questions or anything. So we have Aladdin, Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. That's all one title, by the way. Child's Play, Dawn of the Dead, Fame, Red Dawn, The Lion King, and The Wicker Man.
Not the bees.
Oh, that film.
That may or may not be the reason why it's pissed off. So just so that everyone at home knows those films again, the 8 possible films for this round are Aladdin, Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, Child's Play, Dawn of the Dead, Fame, Red Dawn, The Lion King, and The Wicker Man. So we've got 7 summaries. And some of them will be absolute quotes. Some of them will be like me paraphrasing. Okay, so for this film, the creator likened the experience of the film being remade as being mugged and considered suing MGM over the use of the original film's logo in this film.
How well do you know your studios?
I think it's more how iconic do you think one particular film's logo is to it?
True.
I think Paul's giving me a film that isn't on the list.
He's broken the
game. So I'll give you a chance to...
So I win by default then?
Yeah. Wait. What was the list of films again? Hang on.
Okay, so...
You wrote it down!
I know. I think I wrote one down wrong.
So I think... So for reference, Paul sent me The Thing. I think what you probably heard was The Lion King.
I must have been, hang on, because...
so the films I've got are Aladdin, Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans.
Yes.
I can't say that fucking name for some reason. Child's Play, Dawn of the Dead, Fame, Red Dawn, The Lion King, The Wicker Man.
Fame.
Oh,
Fame.
I'm Gonna Live Forever.
Yes, that one.
That's what everyone was thinking once I said.
Fame. Right, okay.
The Thing. I'm Gonna Live Forever.
Okay, all right, I'm with it.
Okay.
Right.
So okay, so Paul, you've updated your answer. So instead of The Thing, what do you think it is?
What do you want me to say?
Yes, please.
Fame.
And Aaron, you've gone for
Fame.
And you are both correct.
Hey.
It is indeed
such an
Fame.
iconic logo.
So this was Alan Parker who was upset by this and genuinely did try to sue because they did not get his consent for specifically that logo.
Yeah.
Excellent. So that's 1 point to both of our guests. The next one. This film... So the creator of the original of this film accused the remake team of being clueless and had lawyers help them to remove their name from all marketing material because they were on the marketing material as like screenplay by. So which
Can
of
you
those
say that
would...
one more time, Craig, for me?
So they accused the remake team of being clueless as to what the original was like and had lawyers help them remove their name from marketing material because they were down as screenplay by. So think, which of those would be so bad that you'd actually get lawyers involved?
I changed my answer last second. I might regret it.
Okay, so let's start with Aaron then. So,
I think this is wrong. I went with Red Dawn.
Okay, what would you have gone for?
I was imming about Child's Play because it's such a different take on that script.
Okay.
But I actually think the right answer might be Bad Lieutenant, thinking about it now.
Okay.
But I've committed.
So you've given me 3 different answers. Let's see if one of them ends up being correct.
I'm covering my bases.
Okay, and Paul, is your answer any of those 3 or is it a different one?
No, it's a different one. I said Wicker Man, but now I'm concerned that it is Child's Play.
Okay. So let's go through this methodically.
Oh, here we go. Put us out of our misery, Craig.
Is it Red Dawn? No. Is it Bad Lieutenant? No. Is it Child's Play? No.
Oh.
Is it The Wicker Man? Yes!
Hey.
So that is a point to Paul.
As soon as I saw that answer, I was like, yeah, that's probably the one I would go for.
Yeah, so that was Robin Hardy who did indeed do all of that.
Probably helped by Craig's comment, like, who would not want to be associated with this?
Yeah.
Well, none of these are great.
Right, number 3. So potentially you know this one if you've been on Twitter and saw a lot of ranting, because due to the contract of the original, they were given no compensation for this remake being made, so they didn't get any compensation for having the original idea. So they ended up venting about this on Twitter a lot. Okay, so Paul, you have given me
Child's Play. I think I remember Don Mancini being angry.
Okay, and then Aaron, you have given me.
I went for The Lion King because I remember I don't know if it was on Twitter, but there was something like the script's basically pretty much identical, and yeah, that's the route I went down.
Okay, so is it Child's Play? It's not. Is it The Lion King? Also incorrect.
Oh.
It's Aladdin.
Oh, so the other Disney one.
Yeah, so
half a point.
Terry Recio went venting on Twitter about how much he thought he should have been given something, but because in the original contracts there was no stipulation for live action later down the line. So, which granted, you would even then. I think there were like a couple of remade ideas under the
101 Dalmatians.
But even if you think older, right? The fact that like they had the Parent Trap around that time as well, and that was the second one.
I guess you would now. If you were writing for Disney now, you'd be like, and I want money when you live action remake it in 3 years.
Yeah. They were so known for animation at that stage.
Exactly,
it would be like, give me that directed VHS money, please. You know.
So number 4. One of the original writing / production crew of this film stated, if you polled the crew of the original, most of them would say, why? Did you really have to do that? It kind of hurts.
This one is so generic, if you don't mind me saying. This could go for...
some of them have like a little bit more specific details to make it easier, but
yeah,
it is the nature of this game.
I guess you have to think like what would be a bad setting.
What's interesting though is you've both given me the same answer.
Oh, yeah.
Look, Potter and Klein, we ride together, we die together. That's how.
So you've both given me
The Lion King.
And that is correct.
Hey.
And David said, "Oh, I jokingly thought that one." No, it's just true.
Well, I just saw like people being on a set, and I was like, there wasn't really a set.
Well, to be honest with you, The Lion King is my favourite film of all time. The '94 version is my favourite film. And when I went to a staff screening when I worked in a cinema for the remake. And
you
one
went
of
to
my
the cinema, did you, Paul?
Yeah, I know. I didn't mention it. And one of my mates was sat next to me, and he was like, "I could feel you for 2 hours getting tenser and tenser."
Yeah.
And literally, he looked at me afterwards and went, "What did you think?" And I went, "Don't talk to me." I was so angry. I was like, "What is the point?"
Me and
Did you
Craig
not like the
left-
Beyonce song that they
Me and
included?
Craig left
Oh my
that film,
God.
and literally Craig was like, "Why was there a thing about a hair in a turd?" And it was just like, yeah.
Next film. They said it lost its reason for being after the first 15 to 20 minutes and called it a video game where there was nothing going on underneath.
I know this one. I do know this one.
Oh, that's a confident answer.
What's the most video game out of these? Video gamey.
That's kind of the quiz. So the answers. So, Paul, your very confident answer.
Dawn of the Dead.
Aaron, did you give me Dawn of the Dead?
I went for the other Dawn movie, Red Dawn.
Well, one of them is correct, and unsurprisingly, it's Paul's. So it's
Of course it is.
when you have that much confidence, you deserve the point.
I remember. Do you know what it is? It's because I am a big fan of George Romero, and I remember him saying about the 15 minutes, because that opening of Dawn of the Dead is sick. And then kind of. I still like the remake of Dawn of the Dead, but I get what he means about it's a video game.
Yeah. I didn't know if there was enough confidence there of you being like, oh, I know which film turns bad after 15 to 20 minutes. But
okay, so we've got 2 questions left. So, the creator of this original, they found the movie stupid and terrible, and that filmmakers were more concerned with cool action scenes than a compelling story.
could be so many remakes.
Specifically, it can only be 3 of these films. One of 3 of these films. Okay. Aaron, what did you go for?
So I have not seen any of these films that remain on the list, but I went for Red Dawn again because I imagine it's the most action-centric out of the 3.
Okay, you've gone for Red Dawn. Paul?
I also went for Red Dawn because I remember it was awful. and it is stupid as well, because didn't they? It was originally China, and they digitally changed.
They
digitally changed all the Chinese flags to North Korea because they were like, "Oh, China's a big market," and it's like,
yeah, that's genuinely what they did.
Wow.
Yeah,
and that is the correct answer.
Oh.
So now we've left with the last one, and this is all word for word what they've said. There might be small extracts that have been removed by the original article, but this is literally what one of the actors or actresses of the original said about this film. I think it's an unbelievably huge move. I think it's a move, absolutely. I don't know why they would with a healthy franchise. And nobody from the original franchise is involved. They're not going to have Brad, they're not going to have Don, and they're not going to have any of us. Cool, and you've both given me the same answer. Was there something there? Some would say that the answer for that is...
Child's Play. Brad Dourif.
It is indeed Child's Play. Specifically, the actress who said that was Christina Leese.
Funnily enough, it's a shame Abel Ferrara, who did the original Bad Lieutenant, when they announced the Werner Herzog one, he had a great thing, which was somebody said, "What do you think?" And he went, "I hope they all die. I hope they're all in a car together and it explodes."
Wow. Okay.
Oh, wow. You can just tell I didn't read that part of the article. I was like, well, I just need 7. These 7 are fine. There's nothing interesting in there.
He had the Wicker Man had a great one, which was Edward Woodward was offered a cameo in the remake and he couldn't do it for, I can't remember what the reason, I think it was a health reason. And Nicolas Cage met him years later. And he was like, "Oh, you're the man that was in that remake of The Wicker Man." And Nicolas Cage went, "Yeah, you got really good reviews for my film."
Wow.
Oh my God. That is not right.
That is one way to look at it.
But one way we should definitely look now with this end game is to the results. So David, tell us what the final scores were.
Well, with them both getting the last two correct, not much change there, but it just give Paul a higher lead. But then Aaron still a respectable 4, but Paul winning with 6.
Congratulations.
Yay!
And Aaron, I think you sort of set this up, didn't you say, when I invited you on? You were like, oh, like maybe Paul will win this time.
yeah, I set myself. So if I win or lose, I came out a champion. But it was a game well played.
So a win each, because we are a
Exactly.
team. We're a team working.
So we'll get you on again in about another 5 months.
Whenever there's another buddy cop film, it's like other films exist, guys. Yeah.
Well, let's see if we are having some form of buddy cop movie this in the next episode. So, Paul, between David's choice from 1982, Aaron's choice from 2009, and your film from 2011, which film would you like to select?
I'm going to go with my film. And my film is The Muppets.
Oh, fantastic.
Life's a happy
Weirdly,
song.
I was like, once you mentioned that, I was actually like, oh, I swear that like I could have made another link here when you said about TV show, but yeah.
But no, Muppets, fantastic.
It's kind of postmodern, makes fun of the TV show, but it's kind of loving, and I love that movie, and I hopefully you guys put it in the vault.
Yeah, because it's interesting. We had an episode during the pandemic which was talking about the Muppets as an overall franchise, and I think we put various Muppet films in. But I don't think we did really talk that much about the Muppets.
I talked about like Most Wanted as like the newer one.
Yeah.
I talked about the original Muppet movie.
So we didn't actually give this film much of an opportunity there. So I'm glad that we actually...
You put Muppets Treasure Island in the vault, if that was in question.
Oh, that went straight in.
Yeah, that might have even been from an earlier episode. I know Christmas Carol, it was in from one of our Christmas specials.
The Muppets have got a good rep in the vault.
Yeah, so we'll get to see if there is another way... or another Muppets film to go in. I think we all know the answer to this, David, but please tell the people at home, if they wish to watch along with us, where could they possibly watch the Disney-owned property of the Muppets?
You can find it on Sky Store, Apple TV, Amazon, Rakuten, but also Disney Plus, which if you are subscribed to. But yeah, you can catch it on a lot of rental services as well. You can catch it on DVD and Blu-ray, etc. Go check it out, and yeah, please do watch along with us. It's a very fun film, very light, and yeah, we're continuing that trend of television shows as well, as people will know from, again, how we got to this film in one way or another. But yeah, thank you, Paul, for that one. That's a great recommendation, and that will make next time's guests very happy as well. I know that our guests are very big fans of all things felt and fuzzy as well.
All things fuzzy as well, hopefully.
Yeah, all felt and fuzzy. So yeah, awesome. Go check out The Muppets if you want to join in our conversation, or if you've seen it before. Obviously, you can catch our thoughts next time. Thank you both for joining us. It was a great endgame there as well. So guys, let us know, where can we catch you? What projects have you got on at the moment? Aaron, you teased earlier about some of the video game stuff you got going on.
So you can find me on Twitter at it's me Aaron P with 2 A's and 1 R. I write for the Mirror of Gaming these days primarily, and but hopefully by the time this podcast is out, my review for Zelda Tears of the Kingdom will be out, if I haven't turned myself into a crying puddle of a person by then. So yeah, please give that a read, and follow me if you're of interest.
Awesome. Go check it out. And Paul?
You can find me on Twitter, Paul Klein Yo with 2 O's. And from there, you can find my link tree, which has my TikTok, it has all my writing, everything I'm writing for Yahoo, writing for Filmhounds magazine. You can also find my Letterboxd, which is Paul Klein Yo with 1 O. And that is not really where I do film criticism. It's where I make bad puns and I complain about tiny things that don't matter in films. It's my cinema sins area.
It almost sounds like a comedic duo, or like a very 90s thing with like your handles as well. It's like, it's me, Aaron P, and like Paul Klein Yo. It's like maybe there's like the Ice Cube kind of like rapping going on here.
Maybe they're the ones suggesting films from the 90s.
Yeah, going out of a username on Twitter, you're like, Paul Klein taken, Paul Klein 1.
Who knows if Twitter's still going to be
Paul
around
Klein's
by
on
the
there.
time this episode gets published? I don't know. playing it day by day.
Yeah, that is like the continuing storyline of this.
Jokes on y'all. I don't use Twitter. I have one. I don't use it.
Every episode, you just hear progressively. Like it's an interesting era, especially when you got people like, oh, you can catch me on. I don't know, what were they called? Like Buffalo and all the like random ones.
Mastodon, yeah.
Mastodon, that's it, yeah. So, and now you're just gradually getting people like, they're not mentioning those, but they're just
You can find me on Bebo.
Yeah.
You can find me outside your house. I'll give you a wave.
Oh, God. That's just Craig for recommending Demolition Man. So, on that note, anything lastly from yourself, Craig?
Well, I had one planned specifically because of what film we're watching next week. It's going to sound really sinister based on what that, but I'll go with it anyway. Maniacal laugh. Maniacal laugh.
Amazing. Right, well, thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you next time for The Muppets. Thanks once again. Bye!
Yay!
To keep up with the latest episodes of Well Good Movies, you can listen to us on all your usual podcast outlets, including Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and more. Don't forget to follow us, subscribe, and rate us where you can to keep our podcast growing. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Well Good Movies to keep up with the latest news and highlights from all our episodes, as well as tell us what movies you want to be discussed in the future. And if all of that isn't enough, you can also find us at our website, freshtakehub.com/wellgoodmovies, where you can catch all our episodes along with videos and articles deep diving into the worlds of film and television. So what are you waiting for? Go check out the film we'll be discussing in next time's episode.